So today we have Rashmi on. Thank you so much, Rashmi, for coming on.
Of course, my pleasure.
And yeah, so Rashmi is a super talented engineer, electrical engineer and biomedical engineer, and also adjunct professor at UBC Biomedical Engineering, new Biomedical Engineering faculty. So thanks so much for coming on. Super excited to have you on.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
And yeah, so why don't you tell everybody about yourself as well?
Yeah, so as you said, I'm a biomedical engineer. That's what I've been passionate about more or less my whole life. Growing up, I've seen my own grandmother struggle with her health, seen a lot of other family members struggle with their health, and as all engineers think, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a solution to this. So that's what motivated me to get into sort of the biology aspect of things, and then problem solving's always been my jam. So it kind of made sense to do biomedical engineering. I guess one thing about me is that I'm the type of person that likes to explore everything and get to know everything about the field. So I've been fortunate to have the opportunity to work at quite a wide variety of places in the field. So all the way from a nonprofit where I was making assistive technologies to working at a for-profit like small medical device company where I got to build medical devices that were deployed into hundreds and thousands of hospitals around the world.
Awesome.
And then startups, clinical engineering, so working at hospitals, and now as a professor as well. So
awesome. Yeah, the wide array of everything.
Yeah, it's interesting to have that perspective, I think.
And what are you up to now? Like, what is your latest thing that you're working on that you're passionate about that you want to share?
So I'm working on quite a few different things. Something that I've really gotten into and something that I feel there's a lack of in the world is the understanding of health for people with ovaries, because there's just not been a lot of research done. So I was working on this project for fetal health monitoring. And as I was working on that project, I realized the lack of research that's out there. And it was so scary to think that, there's so many people going through pregnancies, and 1 in every 100 pregnancies ends in a stillbirth, which to me is insane. Like it's such a big number. So that kind of made me realize that there was a lot of different places that we could improve health for people with ovaries. And so I kind of started getting into that. That's one of my startups that I'm working on. And then I'm also working at a company that makes surgical robots for breast biopsies. Because,
nice.
That's another thing that is like horrifying if you know the process. Like it's this massive needle that's like the size of your head that is inserted into the breast for biopsies. It's a really scary procedure, and quite often times like when they're putting it in, they miss like the spot, and so they have to like take it out and put it in, and it like creates quite a big of a bore hole, and obviously it's painful and it's traumatic for the person going through it. So that's another thing that I'm very passionate about, and I'm fortunate to have the opportunity to work with. And then I'm also really into sustainability recently. After having worked as a clinical engineer and seeing the massive amount of medical waste being generated, I kind of realized that we're not very sustainable as engineers. Like the sustainability aspect of it comes as an afterthought usually. And I feel like that needs to change. So that's one of the things that I'm teaching in my classes. We have to think of end of life as for the products.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm teaching in my course, but I'm also trying to implement that by creating compostable menstrual pads.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So working on a couple of different things.
Awesome. Yeah, a lot of stuff. So one thing I wanted to ask you is, because you have a lot of different projects going on, and obviously you're very passionate about all of them. Mm-hmm. And is there usually like an aha moment where you're like, oh, this is something I want to work on, then you go in on it? Or what makes you gravitate towards a particular project?
When it's a project that I can relate to.
Okay.
For example, the breast biopsy, I actually recently had a friend that had a bit of a cancer scare and had to undergo the process. And it was so traumatizing for her because, she's my age, she's 27. And that's like a really scary thing to go through. And it kind of made me realize that it's something that needs to be worked on. And similarly for other things, I hate having to use menstrual products that are ending up in the landfill. It's ironic that something that is healing me is harmful to the earth and is going to be harmful to the generation. Yeah. So I don't want to have to pick between my well-being, my convenience, and, you know, the safety of the planet and like the future generations. So yeah, when it's something that I relate to and that I feel frustrated by, it's my aha moment.
Yeah, got it. And so I want to kind of shift gears to grad school. So amongst people, there's almost a stigma about grad school, like, oh, don't go to grad school. And I think there are a lot of fields, by the way, where I think that grad school might not necessarily be your best option. Engineering is definitely not one of them because you gain a lot of skills in there. But I want to kind of get your take on the stigma around grad school and then what you've learned from grad school.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and it kind of takes me back to the original concept of university for me, in that people go into university to get a job after, as opposed to people going into university to use it as a tool to do something they're passionate about. And I think grad school is the exact same. So for me, I went through undergrad knowing that I was interested in biomedical engineering. I went into into the biomedical field, learned about it, and then I decided that it was time to do my master's because I was like, okay, now I want to go and like level up my understanding and my knowledge of the biomedical field now that I have an understanding of how it works. So I think there's a balance as well. You know, I do understand the perception of going through university and like especially, you know, if you go through your PhD, you don't have the equivalent skills of someone that has worked for the same amount of time. I mean, an example of that is within the first year of me working after I finished my undergrad, I think I probably learned more in that 1.5 year than I did in like my entire 5 years of university, which is kind of bad to say. So there's definitely a trade-off. But the other thing that I realized was that there are doors opening for me after finishing my master's that I didn't know were closed.
Right.
So for example, I didn't know that I couldn't become a clinical engineer if I didn't have a master's degree. And I only figured that out by doing my master's degree and realizing, oh wait, I can only apply for this job if I have this degree. So I think there's pros and cons of both sides, but I do understand the stigma that is associated with it. And I think master's is kind of different. It's just sort of to upgrade your skills. But PhD, you know, you really have to be passionate about the research you're doing and
Absolutely,
you really want to have to work on that for the future.
Yeah.
You can't get your PhD and then kind of go into another field expecting the same like salary maybe as other people that have worked for that time because the skill sets are totally different.
Yeah. No, I think passion plays a key part in it. And what are some of the things that you think you've learned from your master's that wouldn't be taught in undergrad? Like you think, I know you mentioned kind of opportunities open for you, but what about in terms of tangible things that you've learned, whether it's technical or also non-technical?
So I think I was really lucky with my master's degree in that I had the ability to craft it to what I wanted it to be. You know, I went into my master's knowing that I wanted to learn more about entrepreneurship in the medical field, to learn more about just the medical field in general, and to also sort of get into some other like things within the medical field that typically wouldn't be available to engineers. So taking courses in midwifery, for example, to learn about fetal health. So I was fortunate enough to do that, and that's what I gained from my master's is this wider understanding of the field that I wouldn't have gotten by just being in the field because there's not a lot of immediate opportunities to get into those different things. But yeah, I think that's sort of the main advantage. Again, it's kind of going into your degree as using it as a tool instead of using it as like a means to find a job.
Right. Yeah, that's such a great point because I see a lot of kids these days that are just undergrad kids that are just there. They want to get a job and that's all they're out of it. And their whole focus is I want to get a job. Yeah. And look now, the market's not the great and they can't find a job and they haven't necessarily learned the tools in place to actually do other things or go follow their other passions, which is really sad, honestly.
Exactly. And I think one of the biggest skills that they're not teaching in undergrad is the value of networking and like actually networking because without networking, you're not getting a job. Like it's so difficult. And to find a job that you enjoy, like you can probably apply for some of the bigger companies and kind of get in if, you know, you have the grades and you have the skills, but to get into like a small company with something that you really enjoy doing and it's like a passion project, it's really hard to do that without the networking skills. Yeah, it's absolutely true. I mean, most people I've hired have been through my network, and it's not to say that I'm not hiring people outside my network or doing like nepotism or anything, but it's just easier to access people that way. And it's also,
easier for people to show off their passions if they've, presented me, or if like I introduce someone or somebody introduces me to someone and they have a project that's very related to what we're doing. And there's so many candidates when you actually put a job posting through that it's really hard to sift through all the candidates. But if they're presented through your network, it's a little bit easier. So from the other side, I think that's super important to know. So one thing I want to know is you do so much stuff and you've always been really excelled at everything. I remember even in undergrad, you were everyone's favorite TA for how much you'd help them. And what are some things that you do you feel that kind of set you apart from others in terms of productivity, in terms of how you manage your day? If you can give some insight into that.
I think probably the one thing that has let me do what I've done is just my ignorance, for lack of better words. I'm trying to think of a better word, but it's really just my ignorance to the fact that I can't do it. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, if other people can do it, why can't I do it? And I just kind of jump into it, and I don't necessarily let the fear stop me of failing. And I've kind of learned to sort of really accept failure as like something good, even though sometimes it's hard and I'd still cry about failure. But yeah, I think that's probably what has let me do so many different things, is I just kind of jump into it and I don't really care whether I can do it or not. I just try my best.
Yeah, this is something I find with a lot of people that I've talked to that are really exceptional in their field, like this kind of propensity for like assiduous improvement or like fear of failure, where it doesn't matter if they're failed, they'll try again and then they'll see if they're better next time and they'll really actually improve. And so when they do it the next time, they get better. Yeah. And one thing actually I can relate to this is even this podcast, this is a kind of a new world for me. And this is, one of my first episodes, but I'm like, okay, I'm doing an episode now. Okay, don't judge me now. Let's see. Okay, 10 episodes from now, I want to be better. 100 episodes from now, I'm going to be better. So that's kind of the way I'm presenting it. And that's the way I feel that, people that are really passionate and really good at what they do, they have this in them internally and they're not scared of failing, even though failure hurts them. I think you're probably one of the people that when you don't do so well on something, you're probably upset, but you probably use that as motivation to do better next time.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm just very stubborn sometimes. I don't let people saying, no, you can't do that, stop me. Yeah. So, but that's very true, is that when I do fail, I definitely like go into a corner and sulk for a whole day and maybe eat a whole tub of ice cream or something. But after that, I kind of just get up and I'm like, okay, screw this, I'm going to try it again.
Yeah. And so going a little bit deeper, so what are some like day-to-day things you do? Like, do you make like a to-do list? Because I know you have a lot of things on your to-do list, but do you actually make a to-do list? Do you have like a calendar? What are some things you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, I have a calendar where everything that I'm doing is on it. So like all my meetings, all my, like if I have like time scheduled out for work, I put it on there. Okay. I'm most effective when I do make to-do lists, but I don't make them often. I wish I did. Yeah. I think that having a calendar with like all my appointments and everything on there definitely makes my life easier. Yeah. But other than that, I do find that I'm like my schedule is quite chaotic, and I just kind of take it like one thing at a time, and so far it's been okay.
Yeah, so you kind of are in one zone at a time when you're doing something, and then you're off to another thing, and your schedule itself lends itself to being organizing in a way. Amidst all the chaos, there's organization because there's one thing after another. Yeah. And that kind of puts you in a frame of reference where you're organized.
Exactly. You know, like you've got a messy room but you know where things are, even though it's messy. So you can access things, and even though it looks messy to people from the outside, it's organized in your own way.
Right. Organized chaos.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah. And along the similar lines, so when you're studying, so let's say you're studying for something because you've had to, study a lot for your undergrad and then your master's. Mm-hmm. Is there do you go into like a zone of full studying where you have everything away from you and you're in a complete zone for an hour?
Yes. I am the kind of person that likes to just sprawl things out on the floor. Okay. And I like sit down. I have to sit down on the floor to study. I don't know why. I can't use tables. Yeah. And then I just sit down, sprawl everything out, and I start taking notes. And notes are like my best friend because I have the worst memory ever. So I have to take a lot of notes so I can remember things and like highlight things. Yeah, that's my way of studying.
Yeah. So, and going to note taking, is that also during a lecture or during when you're watching a video, you're also an avid note taker, or are you more of a listener during that? Okay.
Yeah, I'm definitely a listener, and I wish they had recorded lectures when I was in my
Oh,
undergrad.
I wish so too.
Because
Yeah.
I'm not good at multitasking when it comes to lectures, so I have to pay attention and listen. I can't like take notes and listen at the same time.
I really wish we had that.
Me too.
Because yeah, I was one of the people that would take a lot of notes during the lecture,
Yeah.
and I really wish I could. And now I see. So my brother is actually in first year engineering now, and he has all the classes recorded. So he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm just listening." I'm like, "Do you have notes?" He's like, "No, I'm just gonna listen later and then take the notes after." So you can listen to a lecture, whereas we had that one moment. And if you miss that moment, which might have been a light bulb moment for you to learn a concept, you don't get it back. But now they can go back and watch it again and again, and that repetition really helps.
Definitely.
Definitely.
My grades probably would have been a bit higher if I'd had that.
They're pretty high, but it's okay. So what are some of the ways that you thought of, because I know you designed a curriculum as well. And so what are some of the ways you thought of industry when designing the curriculum? Because it's really important to make sure that what kids are learning are also applicable to industry.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could talk about that.
So I had this pretty unique opportunity when I was helping out with accreditation in undergrad. It's a funny story because I took the job because it was posted as like a data entry position, and I'd kind of come out of like a situation where I was like burning out quite a lot. So I'd started my master's, and I was like, okay, I need like a chill way to make money, and it was just a data entry job. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna take it up, and then they were actually like, oh yeah, if we need your help with the whole accreditation. It's not just data entry. And I was like, oh, okay. And then what eventually ended up happening was I realized that there was a duplicate of courses. So there was 2 courses that were the exact same. So I ended up telling them about it, and then I kind of got the opportunity to make a course. So make the curriculum for a course there. Yeah. So I guess getting back to your question about how I was able to pull in the industry. I think this is something that I was very frustrated about when I was in my undergrad, is the lack of industry application.
Yeah.
We've got some fantastic professors at UBC, but I feel that there's a lot of the industry application missing in a lot of our courses. So what I did for this was I kind of went through everything that I felt was missing in my undergrad that I learned when I was working at Delphi. And I started writing like this whole list of things down where I was like, oh my God, like I would have been such a better engineer if I had this and this and this. And then I kind of took all of that and I organized it into a curriculum, into a syllabus. So that was kind of how I started doing it. And then eventually they realized that they needed another course. So I created another course, and then that's how I ended up teaching that course.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So now stepping from when you were creating a curriculum to back when you were following them. So what was a young Rashmi like, and how do you think that your experiences and your past kind of led you into the fields you're in now?
That's an interesting question. So the one thing that has kind of led me to where I am today is the fact that while I appreciate authority, I don't really consider people higher than me or lower than me. I just consider everyone as my peers. Yeah. So this kind of happened even in high school too, where I would just like talk to my teachers as my peers. And that kind of continued into university. And I think that sort of opened up a lot of doors, because by chatting with professors in like a very casual way, they would sort of impart a lot of like the mistakes that they had made in their undergrad onto me. So that definitely shaped who I am today. My perhaps a lack of appreciation for authority. So that definitely shaped who I am today. Can you repeat the question again? I've forgotten the question. So
I think you kind of touched on it, but what other experiences can you think of some particular experiences that kind of led you down to pursuing engineering specifically?
Engineering, yeah. I guess when I was very young, I always had the influence of my dad. He's an electrical engineer, electronics engineer. Yeah. And so one of my earliest memories, and perhaps not the best one, but when I was very young, like pre-speaking, like crawling on the floor, Rashmi, I touched a soldering iron with my fingertips. Oh, did you? And so that's like my very first experience of a soldering iron. But I very quickly like learned how to use a soldering iron and like watch my dad like pull apart components, put them on. And he's a very curious person, to the point where like when he was younger, he would he always tells me the story of how he broke his mom's radio, like trying to understand the components
Oh,
and like
yeah.
taking it apart. And so I became that person growing up. I feel like I gained a lot of that curiosity from my dad. And so I would break things apart, put things together. I remember when my brother's like electronic like dog walking toy broke, I like took it apart and I realized it was just like a wire that was like had come off the board, and I resoldered it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess random things like that just kind of amounted to me realizing that I enjoy problem solving. And so that's kind of how I went into engineering.
And so going into engineering, and I hear this from a lot from some of my peers, but what are some of the challenges that you faced as a woman in STEM? Because there still are a lot out there.
Oh yeah. I think the biggest thing is the way that people underestimate you just because you're a woman. You know, you kind of go into group projects, and this mostly happened when I was in like first and second year. It didn't really happen in my later years because I got to know my peers quite well, and I picked a group of like people that I worked with that I really enjoyed. But yeah, I guess in my younger years of engineering, people would definitely sort of be like, oh, it's okay, I'll do the technical part, you can do the documentation kind of thing. And like, oh, it's okay. Like even the professors would be like this.
Really?
And it was kind of all around too. Like this is a story that I tell quite often whenever people ask me this question. But I was in second year, and you know how they give you this like box, like this toolbox in second year?
Yeah,
with, like,
all the
tools?
components and everything.
Yeah. So I was holding that toolbox, and I got onto this bus. And I was the only person on the bus, and the bus driver was like, oh, that's a weird carry case for your makeup. And I was like, what? What does that mean? So that was sort of like, you know, should I not be carrying a toolbox? Like, am I not supposed to be? Like, what's wrong? And then I guess another situation where I was like trying to buy this like mechanical engineering book because I was just curious about what it was talking about. And the person that was selling it was like, oh, who are you buying this for? Like your dad, your boyfriend, your brother? Like, are you buying it for? I was like, for me? Like, I'm an engineer.
Yeah.
So you kind of get all these like little snide comments from people, especially maybe some of the older generation of people. And then I guess even sometimes with my peers and like my bosses, like they'll like look at like my male counterpart when like talking about the technical parts, and then look back at me like, do you understand? Like, do you understand it? Yeah. So there's definitely challenges like that, but sometimes you can use that to your advantage.
Right.
You know, if people are gonna assume certain things, you can kind of take that to your advantage. And I've when I was younger, I used to feel the need to prove myself. But now I don't really care. Like if you're gonna assume that, then I'm gonna, you know, maliciously comply.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that it is getting better because you get to see kind of the younger generation? Do you think it's getting better? Because I know it's really bad with some of the older people I meet when it's like some of the best engineers I've met are women. Some of the most talented engineers I've met are women. And you do see some people that are like maybe, you know, did engineering in the 70s or 80s, and they, exactly as you mentioned, they don't really regard people on the same level, which is astonishing to me personally. But do you think it's changing with the younger generation? Or I know there's still a lot of ways to go, but is there improvement, do you think?
I think it's getting better for sure. I think that, you know, with the younger generations, you're seeing a lot more interaction between the different genders, and you're seeing a lot more, you know, I don't want to say like respect, but like you're seeing that mutual respect between everyone. And I feel like you're seeing less of like the dismissal behaviors that you typically see with engineers when it comes to interacting with women engineers.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful for the future, and I'm really glad that a lot of like the universities have put on this like 50-50 by a certain year or something.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's getting better slowly.
Yeah. And so what advice would you give for young people in general that are kind of navigating through, maybe they want to go into biomedical, maybe they want to go into electrical, and they're, you know, in high school or first or second year? What types of advice would you give them?
Spend less time memorizing things, spend more time being curious.
Okay.
Like go break things. Like don't be afraid to break things. Don't be afraid to like, you know, fail when you try things. Like I think it's crazy how the way that the school system is right now, it conditions you to believe that you have to be 100% in order to be successful. If you get 90, 70, 60, whatever on a test, you're a failure. But you learn so much more by failing than you do by being successful sometimes. And a lot of those lessons you can actually take with you and apply to you in all aspects of life. So I think the biggest thing that I try to tell the younger generation is fail. Fail and learn from it, and don't be scared of failing, because if you learn not to be afraid of it, you'll be super successful when you're older, I think. That's
a great point, because I remember every single midterm I didn't do well on, but I don't remember the ones that, I've got like hundreds on them, like high 90s on midterms on a lot of them, and I don't remember those, but I remember the ones that I didn't do well on. So it kind of tells you about how maybe I use that as an experience to learn and get better at it. So I think that's a good point. And I think people are really scared of failure and really focus grade heavy when they're not really knowledge heavy.
Yeah.
And the kind of the paradox there is, if you're really good at being curious and knowledgeable about it, the grades will actually come as well. It's not like they're mutually exclusive too.
It's true. I do agree with that, but I think in certain cases there's just the way that tests are conducted, they're just kind of set up to make you fail.
Yes, yeah.
And not in a positive way. Like for example, there was one course that I struggled with and I ended up failing. And EMAG. It was EMAG. Okay. But the irony is that I learned it so well, like even the second time around, like I didn't do well. But I ended up learning it so well that I ended up getting a patent in it.
Nice.
So I don't feel like grades are a good reflection of your understanding or your ability to apply. It's just a good reflection of your ability to memorize sometimes.
Yes. No, 100% agree. And I think the tests themselves are brutal. Like, they're not conducted in the best way possible. And that's why I really do like project courses. I think project course grades are, especially when candidates apply sometimes for jobs, I kind of look at project course grades. If they have their grades, some people provide their grades. Mm-hmm. I don't really look at grades usually, but if, for co-op, people will provide it, UBC will provide a transcript. And I really do index heavy on project course grades, because that means that you worked with people. Sometimes it means that maybe they got carried by someone, but if you ask them, it's pretty obvious to know who did and who didn't once they get to an interview. Like, if you ask them what they did.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the other thing when you're interviewing someone, because I recently had the opportunity to interview a bunch of people for my company, what I find is that, like, even though they have good grades, sometimes they don't have the curiosity and the excitement to apply it. They're just kind of looking for a job to meet their, like, whatever, their co-op requirements. So I find that the other thing to do sometimes is to give them like a little like test or something to see their problem solving skills and their curiosity and the way that they apply what they know. I find that
kind of like a take home test, or like on the spot?
Take home. Yeah. So I just kind of give them a couple of questions and I'm like, how would you solve this? Like, this is a problem. Go use the internet. I hate the fact that in education, people aren't allowed to use the internet when they're doing tests, because in real life, like, I Google everything.
Google Stack Overflow, everything.
Yeah, exactly. And I sometimes find, like, I personally don't ask for grades, because, I don't think that they're a good reflection for what I need.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so kind of going back to that point, what are some other gaps that you see in current students or current people that are applying for jobs that you've seen?
I think they just don't have enough exposure to what working is like in real life, and so they get so stressed out about having to remember everything that they're learning in university. And I was the same, and now that I'm on the other side of it, I'm probably using like 5% of what I learned in university, if that. Like, the knowledge is very specific, and you often learn it on the job rather than what you learn in university.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing that I wish more students thought about, is like, don't freak out about remembering everything. As long as you understand like the core concepts of it, you'll be able to pull that and learn more as you need to apply it.
Yeah, and I think it is a bit cliche when we say it, but it is really about learning how to learn.
Oh yeah.
Because things like, okay, let's make a K-map and kind of solve this large equation.
Yeah.
We did that a lot, but we don't really use it that much. But the underlying theory behind it is very important to know.
Exactly.
So it's almost as if there's a point at which you should be taught, and then the application of that point or the testing of that point is kind of the gap in the system.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Do you think personally that there are some ways that the education system can be improved to kind of address that point?
Massively, massively. I think the best way to address that is by pulling in more people from the industry to teach, because there's a lot of fantastic professors. They're very supportive, but they don't have a lot of industry experience.
Right.
And I think sort of having a good balance of that is necessary for students to be successful and to jump into the field with like a running start.
Yeah.
Because right now they're like getting into the field and they have to like put all their brakes on and figure out what's going on. And then they have to like start going and like ramping things up. But if you want students to like jump into the field with like a running start, I think having professors with industry experience is a way to go.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I'm glad that biomedical students had someone like you be able to, teach them a couple of courses. I know a couple of really good people too who have actually gone back and kind of taught at least a couple of courses, or like taught like as guest lecturers for a couple of courses, which I think is super useful, because I remember having a couple of people from industry, and those classes were particularly interesting and particularly different. So I would pay attention to those.
Yeah, definitely. The main course that I teach, I bring in a lot of guest lecturers in.
Nice.
And what I'm particularly trying to do is show them that they don't have to go the typical route. For biomedical engineers, you either go into like quality or regulatory or R&D or research. There's typically only like 4 pathways, and they usually end up going into like biomed startups or biomed companies, but there's a lot of other fields that require biomedical engineers. So an example of that, I brought in a friend of mine that's a mining engineer.
Oh, cool.
And I got him to talk about all the health discrepancies that are happening in the mining field, and the way that biomedical engineers can help with that and improve that. And the only way you're going to do that is by working with other mining engineers and working at a mining engineering company.
Yeah.
So to me, it's really important for students to also realize that they can work in other fields too with their degree.
So going kind of into your field, what are some trends that you see in biomedical engineering now? Because the only ones that I'm kind of privy to that I do see a lot of movement on is kind of dietary restrictions and things around that, whether that's technologies, detection, systems, and obviously software. But what do you see as kind of other areas where that's really ripe for change in biomedical engineering?
Well, I think with the rapid improvement of technology, and especially sensor technology, we're opening up innovation to a lot of new ways of monitoring the body, which I think is really exciting, because then we can understand more of it. And what that really allows us to do is then personalize the care given to people, which is such a big thing right now, because the way that healthcare is administered is, they've done a bunch of research, they have these ranges, and these ranges are applied to everyone, which to me is crazy. I think the biggest direction that biomedical engineering is going in, and I hope it continues to go towards, is personalization of healthcare, because it's so important. And I think that, a lot of healthcare providers, they are able to provide better services by using these personalized medical devices, because they understand their patients a bit more. Yeah.
I think the point you touched on is absolutely spot on, because the one thing I've learned is how different people's diets are, how different people's bodies really are. And that's the one thing I've learned, and not even from being in the field, but kind of being indirectly in the field. And everybody's so different. Even if you look at, we have, for example, people's dietary fingerprints, and everybody's dietary fingerprint is so different. So just being able to address that and experiment and kind of work on one body versus, okay, maybe this range of this applies to one person, I think is really an important thing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the improvement in security with medical devices is really good too. Like it's getting way better, and people are, where in the past doctors might have accidentally caused overdoses just by not paying attention or something. Medical devices, the security that's being implemented is really going into preventing that, because I personally have had 2 friends where the physician's negligence caused their mothers to pass away from an overdose. So that's a really big deal, and that's happening so much more, and it's not talked about at all. And I think that, obviously the physician's not doing it intentionally, but it's something that should absolutely be prevented for sure.
Absolutely. And so kind of changing gears a little bit back to what stuff that you're working on, do you see a trend of like interdisciplinary things that are happening? Because you do see that a lot. Like you see a lot more groups and startups that have, you know, people from very different ranges, but they're all working on the same problem. Does that also apply to your field?
It could be better.
Okay.
It's getting there. It's people are talking about it way more now, and you're bringing together people, but it's definitely not where I would hope it would be in the 21st century.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, you can even see that within UBC, where, you know, different departments within biology and engineering, you know, I think that they should all be like interacting and working on projects together, but that's not happening right now as much as it should be, in my opinion. And this is the same in the real world too. Yeah. And what I'm really excited about with what I'm doing, you know, for example, the compostable menstrual pad, you know, I get to work with a composting engineer from a composting company. I get to work with, you know, all of these different people. And I'm really excited about bringing in different perspectives to try and make a really good solution, because I think that is the only way that you're going to get something that really works globally is by bringing in as many perspectives as possible and trying to understand the problem from all of these perspectives and solving them from all of these perspectives. And then you get something that might work for almost everyone. Exactly.
Because you can't get the knowledge that someone who is working in that particular field has gotten over working there for like 5-6 years.
Oh yeah.
Just by, you know, research or reading yourself, you can't. And that's something that can't really be substituted. And I think more startups, more universities, and even more really like larger companies too should really focus on interdisciplinary things.
I definitely agree.
Awesome. So one question that I always like to ask, Rashmi, is do you have any questions for me that you're curious about or anything in general?
Yeah, I guess I'm curious about what motivates you, because you've also got so many things going on. You know, you're working at VoltSafe, you're working on your own startup, you're doing this podcast, you've got so many things going on. So what motivates you to do all these things?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I have a lot of motivating factors. Some of the things are similar to you. Like I think I've always felt kind of the need to prove myself as well. And I think I am motivated by financial factors as well, though not so much like, okay, I'm going to get money or whatever, but I'm just like, you know, that is something that you look forward to. But the other thing I think that's always been kind of in the back of my head is when I kind of look back to like a younger me, I'm like, would a younger me really be proud of what I'm doing, or what would they be happy to see that I was doing now? And that kind of gets back to me, because I would think that when as a younger me, I want to do so many different things. Something I want to keep doing those things. And I find that it's very easy for me on a day-to-day basis to kind of keep going through tasks, because it's just routine life, going through one task after another. So I think those three, but I think really I always think about, and sometimes it's not always the best. Like sometimes it comes in the way of other things that you do have to reprioritize, because I've missed out on a lot of kind of family things here and there just from working so much. But I kind of think back to, you know, what would I have done? I would have liked to, you know, be doing a lot of stuff and had a lot of good stories to tell, because I definitely have that. Yeah,
that's true. I think you get a unique set of experiences by doing things like this that is hard to relate with people sometimes. I definitely understand what you say when you feel like you've missed out with family, because I feel like I've missed out on certain opportunities by working so much sometimes.
Yeah.
But I find that there's some satisfaction of like doing this kind of stuff too.
Yeah, because I find when I am doing something, I complete a task, or I'm up really late and then I finish something up, or we, you know, figure out a new way to do a business model or anything like that, really that completion, all the hours required to do it kind of feel really good after.
Right.
And it's not even really the end goal. It doesn't really, I found, satisfy me that much. Like, let's say I finish something and I deploy it, or, you know, we build something that's in production and people are using it. Like the end goal of that is obviously it feels good that people are using it and you're kind of able to make a little bit of a change. But really, I think back to the hours that are the grueling hours where I did work on it, and those times kind of fuel me a little bit more. Like that nostalgia feels almost better than the accomplishment itself, which is kind of ironic, but that's like how I feel.
No, I totally relate to that. I was actually, have you seen the new McLeod building?
I have, yeah.
So I spent probably like 90% of my like last couple of years in my undergrad on 4th floor McLeod.
Same.
And I was walking through it and I had so many flashbacks, and I was like, God damn, like, wow. Like,
I haven't gone in actually, so I should go back in. And
you should. You'll definitely feel nostalgic. Like I saw the equipment and everything, and I was like like I'm proud of my younger self for putting in that energy, that time to get to let me be where I am today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I think about the stories aren't really always about like the demo or what happened during the demo. It's more so about the long hours that we spent working on things. I don't know if you relate to that.
Oh yeah, definitely. And like with all the people that you got to work with and, you know, struggle with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, Rashmi, so I think this is a great conversation. Thanks so much for coming on again. I think I definitely learned a lot, and I'm really hoping to kind of listen back and kind of take a few things again, because we can, because it's recorded, right?
Yeah.
It's not a one-time thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This
Yeah.
was fun.